episode 49 of the podcast. What happens when we're in the mode that says, I have to win this? This dog can't think that he's won. What training methods are we actually using when we're in a adversarial, we need to win it kind of mindset? Find out this week.
You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Neumeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, certified behavior consultant for canines, certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is where grooming and training meet.
I want to talk about the idea that we need to win this. The dog can't think that they've won. When we frame our interactions as winning, we're really taking an adversarial role, right? Are we looking at combat? Is this a battle of wits? If we're focused on winning, we're also having someone else lose. This isn't a great setup for thinking about behavior. And I know that many groomers were not thinking about the learning process, but that's, of course, why you guys are here. So you guys are thinking about it, and you guys are awesome. So does it serve our purpose in the grooming shop or the animal hospital or taking care of our dogs at home? To have this idea of we need to win or we can't let him think he's won. No. The thing is, it's a style that is part of the dominance theory, which is based on the belief that some dogs are trying to take over and we need to put them into their place, the way that wolf ancestors would have. And actually, if you circle back to episode 18, we talked about dominant dogs. You can head back to that episode for more information. But in short, pop culture has taken this idea of wolves, packs, and dominance and turned it into something that means aggressive behavior, and also turned it into something that applies to dogs, which dogs and wolves are very, very different. They do not behave the same way. So that's not at all what it is. We aren't using dominance to be aggressive. So if we're not trying to dominate dogs or be more dominant over them, the idea of winning falls by the wayside. Okay, we don't have to be locked into an adversarial role and to work with our dogs. What we need to do is teach them to be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. Those 3 C's. So the idea of we have to win is kind of an old school idea based on this old dominance theory. Now, there is dominance in dogs, but it doesn't mean what you think it means. Or maybe it does. Maybe you guys are enlightened and you're like, oh, yeah, of course it doesn't mean that way in grooming. So, but what happens when we take that adversarial role? When we start thinking, I can't let this dog win. And I was at Groom Expo this weekend, which, by the way, was awesome. And if any of you were there, it was so nice meeting a bunch of people who listen and maybe get some new listeners out of it. But I had a lot of fun. I'm going to use an example. I watched 2 groomers working with a dog at Groom Expo this weekend. 2 groomers that I highly respect. I've learned so much from. I'm not naming names because that would be unfair and it would be kind of mean-spirited. But what I wanted to tell you guys about is what I observed. Because I know that I used to do things this way. Many of you used to do things this way. Many groomers out there are still doing things this way. So these 2 awesome, kind, loving, seasoned pros were handed a dog for a demo. The dog wasn't the breed they were expecting, like they were kind of just throwing this like, oh, okay. Being the awesome people that they are, they just rolled with it. Okay. Like I said, this isn't about shaming anybody. That's not what I do here. But I do want to point out the way that many of us were taught, because what they're doing seems so normal for so many groomers. And I know I used to do it this way too. Okay. First of all, the dog was nervous, but he was enjoying being snuggled to calm down. It's a trade show, right? This is a very overwhelming environment. This dog's in her arms calming down. Certainly not a highly aggressive, normally highly aggressive dog, right? The dog that can calm down in your arms is having a bad day, right? Hopefully you guys can kind of see that, like, okay, this dog's having a tough time. And they did too. They gave him some snuggling. Like I said, these are super kind people. So when the clippers were turned on near the pup's face, the dog tried to wiggle away. So he's trying to wiggle, and they're trying to, okay, well, now calm down. Kind of pressed onto him. And then they turned the clippers backwards so that they're using the back of the clipper, the base, to just kind of rub all over his face instead of the clipper side, so that he's getting a little bit of vibration and the touching. Excellent, right? We use things like that. Like, okay, well, let's make an easier version. The thing is that they were using the base of the clipper to get him used to it. Get him used to it is the idea behind it. Like, okay, I can follow along with that. And when he calmed down, they didn't stop. They went directly to trimming his face. Okay, like, oh, good, he's calm. Let's move on to make it harder. All right, and you guys listening probably know that that's part of we're assessing as we go. Okay, he calmed down. Great. Let's see if we can try it. But as you know, many of us here, I've mentioned before that, oh, sorry, my voice is kind of gone too because I sing on road trips, so 8 hours in the car. But when we use the clippers and we're trying to help him be calm, if he gets worried again, sometimes we have to backtrack and not worry about clipping that hair. But they were pretty convinced that hair needs to be clipped and went into this adversarial, we need to win this. We can't let him think that he's won. So put him back to just, using the base of the clippers around his face, getting him used to it, getting him used to it, getting him used to it. Then they went back to try to trim his face again. This time he's wiggling away, but he's starting to push up his paws and push her hand away. Like, I see that as behavior getting worse. A dog is becoming more uncomfortable and not less uncomfortable. And I'm saying this here so that you guys can also think about, hey, is that something I do? Right? Which is why it was very interesting for me to watch them, because it's been a while since I have observed someone else's grooming in the way that I used to, right? So he's trying to wiggle and now he's pushing his paws. Can't let him win was the idea, right? So more touching, they got him to stop pushing. Now he's kind of clamped down, right? More touching, more touching, more touching. Went back to trimming his face. Now he's trying to use his teeth on the clipper, right? Not super aggressive. He's pretty nice guy, actually. I think he's just overwhelmed and just trying some new things. Like, can I get her to back off if I push? Can I get her to back off if I put my teeth on the clipper, right? So wrestled him down. He can't win this. Back to touching him with the base. Back to touching him with the base, right? There were a couple of air snaps at her hands. Now the lip is starting to sneer, right? I want you to think we're seeing teeth, we're seeing curled lips, we're seeing a dog that's now thinking about, do I have to tell you I'm going to hurt you? Right? That's what those things are. They are warnings. This behavior is becoming worse. So they're back to touching with the back of the clippers because they can't let him win. And I understand where they're coming from. And I want you guys to recognize what's happening because the dog's behavior is getting worse. And when we talk about the 3 C's, calm, comfortable, and cooperative, if he starts to calm down, I would back off, not continue or progress. So what was different from what I do is when he started to calm down, they would go back to trying to trim. Whereas if he started to calm down, I would have put the trimmers away for a minute and started working on something he's comfortable with and gone back to end on calm, right? Hey, if I'm calm, sometimes she backs off and makes me feel safe again, okay? So back to what I was observing from these wonderful, wonderful seasoned professionals, okay? This is not about making anybody feel like I'm calling them out. That is not what I do. You guys know I'm a pretty nice person, or at least I hope you know I'm a pretty nice person. That's not what this is about. This is about the technique they're using that is so prevalent in our industry that does not necessarily help. And to observe behaviors, and even if it means recording yourself when you have a dog like this and kind of say, am I doing that? And record yourself and look at it and say, you know what? His behavior was getting worse, and I didn't notice it because I was focused on his hair. So when they finally got a chance to trim a piece of hair on his lip that they had decided was the goal, right? This section of his lip, he can't win. I have to win, right? As soon as that hair was trimmed, she was like, see, we won. Good job. You're okay. But what I observed is when she trimmed that hair on his lip and pulled the clippers away, he rapid fire air snapped at her clippers in her hand. And then she told him, hey, good job. See, we got it done, and gave him some snuggles, which he enjoyed. So there are 2 types of reinforcement there. One type of reinforcement was negative reinforcement. You did a behavior that is probably going to increase, whether you wanted it to or not, right? The air snapping was negatively reinforced because the clippers moved away. We have a dog who is now much more likely to try that when he wants clippers to go away. Right? It was negatively reinforced. And then it was positive reinforced also because she picked him up and gave him some big snuggles and told him he was great. right? Because in our mind, when we're groomers, sometimes we're thinking about that piece of hair as our goal for that's what we needed to get done. See, it wasn't so bad. You did fine, little buddy. You can survive, right? And the emotions are in the right place. The emotions, the feelings that we have, but the science, the behavior, the observations, I want you to be thinking, did it help? And no, it didn't. So even old school punishment based trainer Chrissy of the past, right, would have said that she just rewarded the air snapping and literally taught him to try more aggressive strategies in the future to get her to stop, right? Even punishment based trainer Chrissy of the 80s would have said, whoa, like if we were in a we need to win it dominance theory stuff that I used to do in the 80s, I would have said, get right back on there. He's not allowed to air snap you when you walk away, right? Like that I still would have been thinking that's not the behavior we want. So I think that many of us do that. We do it. We get wrapped up in the idea that I'm just trying to teach you that, see, nothing's so bad. It wasn't so bad. Nobody got hurt. You're fine. But the behavior was really important. And I know, like I said, many of us have been taught that way. There were many opportunities to calm that dog down. But we're still in a mindset of we need to win. So those opportunities got missed. And not because he wasn't being handled by people who are kind and awesome, because I have so much respect for those two women who are grooming him, right? They are kind and they are awesome, right? I adore them, but they didn't notice, they didn't recognize, they weren't observing the behavior. They were thinking about making the problem stop to get the hair trimmed, right? Different mindset. There were opportunities to calm the dog down. Like when you started rubbing his face at the base of the clipper instead of the clipper side, right? And he'd calm down. That was a great time to just move it away. Tell him he was good. Try again. Move it away. Tell him he was good, right? There are lots of ways that we could have built up on the behavior that we liked, right? The behavior that we're hoping for. Opportunities to calm the dog down. My prediction for this dog, based on what I observed as escalated attempts to make people stop, and that last attempt being actively rewarded, is that this dog will, in the future, when faced with something similar, which could be afoot, it could just be something that he thinks is scary, but something similar, he will start struggling, sneering, and air snapping. Because he literally got worse. When we look at the behavior and what we see, what we search for objective facts, this dog got worse, and worse behavior made it stop. It made the groomer back away. It made the action cease. So my prediction is that this dog will have a little bit of a problem next time he's groomed, because something that scares him, he's going to try what worked. Instead of what we started with, which was a dog that was a little bit wiggly. He was just wiggly. He hadn't even thought about using his teeth. Okay? So in the next part, we're going to talk about what methods were really being used in that case. If you're enjoying my podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Now let's talk about that example I just gave, that particular interaction, right, between that individual and those particular groomers in that moment, right? We're always looking at what is in front of us today when we're talking about behavior. So part of the problem I had watching this was that they also called it counterconditioning and desensitization. And it is not. What they were doing was trying to get him used to it. Very, very different than counterconditioning and desensitization. Okay? So I want to talk about what counterconditioning and desensitization is so that you guys can also recognize, hey, that doesn't sound like the same thing at all. All right? So counterconditioning is teaching a dog to display a behavior that's different than the current one. Okay? It means that we want not necessarily an opposite, but we want something dramatically different. Things like counterconditioning can be used when, so for example, when one of my guys used to look at other dogs in a very hostile way, and now he looks at them like, oh, hi, dogs are around. That means good things for me, right? That's a very different response from him, and that's the response that I want, that I've built, that I've tended to, like tending a garden, right? That's the response that we've been working on and that I desire. And it's a safe response, right? So if we're thinking about counter conditioning, we're actually teaching the dog a response that is closer to what we want. All right. And then desensitization is exposing them to small amounts of a challenge at a low intensity. So counterconditioning and desensitization go hand in hand usually because that's an effective way to help a dog slowly progress. Okay. So in a perfect world, the same things that they were doing were pretty close in some ways, right? Like putting the base of the clipper next to his eye instead of the actual clipping part and not worrying about clipping him, just getting him used to the thing beside him, means that they were using desensitization to the extent that they were trying to expose him to a lower intensity, something easier, something that was a little bit easier than actually being clipped. However, his behavior was getting worse. So he was not actually becoming desensitized, he was becoming sensitized to it. And that's where we have to worry about our terminology and be thinking about, well, what are we actually seeing? Because it's not because our intention is to counter condition and desensitize, it has to show up in the behavior. Otherwise, we all have had a dog. I'm going to talk about any trainer out there who we're observing and we're using a protocol that we've used before and it's worked many, many times. And we're watching this one animal who's not having the same response. And we have to backtrack and say, this is not helping this animal. I am not seeing more of a behavior I want. I am not seeing less stress, right? We need to reevaluate and figure out what makes this dog tick. Okay, so counter-conditioning and desensitization involve a slow process of gradually getting the dog used to it and helping them be calm. At least in grooming, right? In grooming and in vet visits, that's generally what we want. We're not trying to train a dog to be bouncy or to be, different. So for example, I know this is going to sound crazy, but if in the last scenario, if what we wanted was a dog to put an item in their mouth and sneer and air snap, then it could be a good goal for a bite sleeve. I know, I'm going to sound kind of fresh saying that. And I'm only pointing it out because we don't always want a dog to be calm, right? If that was your goal, to actually get him to start grabbing something, for example, a bite sleeve, or maybe a tug toy, like some dogs need to learn how to get a little bit crazy with a tug toy. But that's not what we were working on. With that, I'm not saying sorry, I wasn't working on the dog. I was observing the dog being worked with and watching the dog's behavior. The dog was never at a point where he was comfortable at all, right? He didn't start off comfortable. He started to get more relaxed in her arms when she was snuggling, but not comfortable, right? He didn't reach comfortable. And then the behavior got worse. He became more sensitized to the clipper, right? So what were they actually using, right? When we say something like, I just need him to get used to it. And especially when we're saying that we need to win this. So what were they using? And what they were using was flooding. Flooding is exposing an animal to something that they're afraid of for a sustained amount of time. The idea behind flooding is that they're hoping that generally, flooding doesn't get used a whole lot, but the hope is that if they're exposed to it a whole lot, they will start to realize that nothing bad happened. Okay? Sometimes the world throws flooding situations at us, right? For instance, we had neighbors that were setting off fireworks. Someone in the neighborhood was setting off fireworks every night. If one wasn't, it was another guy, and sometimes it felt like a battle. They were on opposite sides, fireworks are legal where I am, right? My dog was kind of flooded by it, but also started to acclimate like, oh, right, this is the same as Tuesday and Wednesday, right? Got it. All right. I'm starting to understand. But if the behavior isn't getting better, then flooding isn't helping. And what it can be doing is, actually making things worse. Okay. So let's also talk about a term called habituation. And that is, again, my voice is going because I was singing in the car for 8 hours. Habituation is a decrease in response to a stimulus after repeated presentations. We're supposed to see a diminished response. Okay. A decrease in response to a stimulus. So that means less of the aggressive behavior after being around the thing a whole lot, after repeated repetitions. We're doing it over and over and over and over again, and we're supposed to see less response. Okay. And those are the kind of things I think they were trying to do, but it wasn't effectively working for that dog. Okay. It's not about our intentions. It's about looking at the dog and seeing if it's working. Okay. And then another one that you can look at was learned helplessness. And that's the belief that we can't change the course of what's going on. They become unable or unwilling to avoid things. They've learned that they can't escape it. Okay, there's no need to even bother trying to get away. Learned helplessness is kind of the dog that's just sulking and sad. Um, and in experiments with rats, they found that if rats couldn't avoid the floor that had an electronic charge to it that would zap them occasionally, even when they were released and they could leave that section, they didn't even bother trying. They're like, I've just given up on the world. So there's learned helplessness, which is possible in grooming, and I think sometimes that's what we mistake for this dog is now fine for us. But that's not calm, comfortable, cooperative, right? That's not a loose dog. That's still kind of the head down. I've given up, Eeyore. You guys remember the Winnie the Pooh with Eeyore, right? Like, okay, that's learned helplessness. Not something we recommend. So in modern dog training, we usually do not use things like flooding, habituation, or learned helplessness because they don't give us the results that we want. I want a dog to cooperate with me. I want a dog who is actively going to be okay for this because if we can teach them to be good, we can help them to be good in situations that might be more challenging later, like the dog that's now injured and needs us to touch their leg, right? Which is more of a pet owner thing. They're more likely to get, fall down the stairs or something and have an owner trying to pick them up. Like a dog that is comfortable with people is going to be different than the dog who is just, I'm just too stressed to even care. Because something hurts them and they might not be too stressed to not care, right? They might go back to the air snapping that they used to do. So this is going to sound a little bit grumpy, and I'm sorry, but here's the thing that really got me about calling it counterconditioning and desensitization, is that is not a buzzword. I would like for people to know what those things mean, but certainly if you are using that word when you're instructing others, you need to know what it means. We live in the information age. Don't take my word for it. Go ahead and Google it, right? But don't point at a bunch of cattle and try to tell me they're ducks, right? There was absolutely nothing at all going on in that moment that was counter-conditioning and desensitization, not even remotely close, okay? And I'm going to be kind of stern about this because I want you guys to be thinking like, yeah, these terms mean something, so that if someone's telling you, oh, I'm using positive reinforcement, you can clearly say, no, I know what positive reinforcement is, and I don't think that was it. Can you tell me how that's positive reinforcement, right? I want you guys to be better at spotting, no, I'm analyzing this a little bit more, and I'm observing the dog, and I'm observing what you're doing, and was it or wasn't it, right? These aren't buzzwords. Counter-conditioning and desensitization is not the same as I'm trying to get him used to it. It's a particular, very specific version of I'm trying to get him used to it. It is very, very specific, and it involves the dog's mood, helping the dog feel better about it, helping the dog be more comfortable with it, helping the dog, not helping the groomer get the thing done. Okay? It's a very different point of view, and it's very effective. We can talk more about that. I've got a whole bunch of new topics in mind because I had some really awesome questions when I taught at Groom Expo. So I know I went a little bit further this week, but it was something really on my mind because this demonstration was, it really brought me back to the way I used to do things. And I wanted to point out where things have changed for me and where I would like things to change for you. So this week's action step is to think about, are you in the mindset of we need to win this? Are you? Are you in the mindset of do we need to win this? And has it helped? Right? What if you're in the mindset of, hey buddy, I need to help you be calm for this? Right? Be in the mindset of the 3 C's. So everybody have a nice week and stay curious. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me through my grooming and training business, happycrittersdogtraining.com, my email, chrissy@happycritters.net, and through the Creating Great Grooming Dogs Facebook page. And we have these awesome devices in our pockets that allow us to do live video with each other. I can help you with the dog on your table. We can set up live lessons, and you may be surprised at how much we can get accomplished together via video. If you're ready to go beyond the podcast, and I hope you do, I've made it really easy for you. If you go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step, you'll see all of the options. There's the Scholar Lounge community, there's the Modern Grooming Professional certification, there's Master Canine Stylist and Professional Canine Stylist diploma testings, there's the Behavior Lab for coaching and private one-on-one sessions with me, and of course the Master Groomer Behavior Specialist program. So go to creatinggreatgroomingdogs.com and click on your next step.